low fell wind, distant. The specific sound of northern exposure, not dramatic, simply present. Underneath everything from the first word, vehicle engine, low speed, steady, tires on tarmac, running. Beneath the narration from the beginning. I have driven the same road for 18 years. I have never told anyone what happens on it. Not my supervisor. Not my wife. Not the two colleagues who covered my shifts when I was sick and drove. The same stretch, and handed the logs back to me the next morning without saying anything unusual had happened. They drove it in daylight. The mile only appears at night. I discovered it on my third shift, November. The eastern approach at 11 p.m. I noted the odometer reading at the cattle grid the way I always did, drove to the western marker and noted it again, and sat in the vehicle for a long time looking at the number. 1 mile extra. I drove back, checked it again. Correct distance. 14 kilometers exactly. I drove it again in the other direction. 1 mile extra. I wrote the correct distance in the log. I went home. I did not sleep. I have not slept properly since November of that year. Here is what I know after 18 years. The mile appears on nights when the temperature drops below a specific threshold and the cloud cover reaches a specific density. I worked out the conditions in year 3. I have never been wrong about when it will appear since year 4. Here is what I learned in year 6. Something lives in it, not lives. That is the wrong word. Something occupies it. Something that was there before the road was built, before the fell was mapped, before anyone put a name to this stretch of northern ground. Something that has been in that mile longer than the concept of a mile has existed. I know this because in year 6 I stopped. Just once. For 11 seconds. I have spent 12 years trying to forget what I saw in those 11 seconds. I have one rule. Do not stop in the extra mile. I do not know where the rule came from. I cannot remember making it. It arrived with the mile itself the first night. The distance was wrong. The understanding was already there. Fully formed. Absolute. Do not stop. Whatever is in the extra mile has one requirement. Keep moving. Last Wednesday night, my engine cut out at the exact midpoint of the safe. Extra mile. The doors locked from the inside. The lights went out. And something that had been waiting a very long time began to move toward the vehicle. Slowly, like it had been, waiting long enough that hurrying would have been an insult to the patience it had developed. I have not moved since. This is Scar Howl. Subscribe and like before it starts. Let's go. I want to tell you about the road first. Not the mile. The road. 14 kilometers of fell road running east to west across the northern upland. Single track in places. Passing points every 400 meters. The tarmac laid originally in 1974 and resurfaced 3 times since. I know the exact years because I have the records going back further than my own tenure. I have been maintaining this stretch since the winter I was 26. I am 44 now. The job is not complicated. Surface inspection, drain clearance, pothole logging, the occasional barrier repair. After a vehicle has come off in poor visibility, I do it alone. Always have. The stretch does not require more than one person, and the authority has never seen reason to assign more. I know every meter of it. The crack that opens at the eastern approach every February, without fail the same crack, the same location, the freeze getting into the same weakness in the substrate every year. I stopped filling it permanently after year 3. It always comes back. I fill it in spring and it comes back in February, and I fill it again. 18 years of the same argument with the same piece of road. I find something reassuring in that now. The road has its own patterns, its own consistencies, its own things that return regardless of what you do about them. The extra mile is the same. I fill it with my attention every shift, and it returns the next time the conditions are right, and I fill it with my attention again. 18 years of the same argument with the same mile. The drain at kilometer 8 that blocks with the same combination of debris every autumn. Bracken and a specific type of field grass that grows on the southern verge and sheds in October. 40 minutes to clear it. I have cleared it 18 times. The passing point at kilometer 11, where the surface has subsided fractionally on the eastern edge, not enough to be dangerous. Enough that I note it every inspection, and the authority notes my note and does nothing, because stable subsidence does not meet the intervention threshold. 7 years of noting it. 7 years of nothing being done. The Fell Road Authority has a threshold for intervention. Below the threshold, noted and monitored. Above the threshold, action taken. The extra mile has never met any threshold. It has never been noted. It has never been reported. Because I have been the only person paying the kind of attention that would notice it, and I have never told anyone. 18 years. I know every meter of this road, which is why I noticed. Third shift. November. I was 26 years old and 3 shifts into a job I expected to find unremarkable. Engine hum shifts slightly. The tarmac sound changes subtly. Different surface, different resonance, almost imperceptible. I noted the odometer at the cattle grid. Standard practice. I record the reading at both fixed points to log my traverse distance for the shift report. I drove west. I noted the reading at the western marker. I sat in the vehicle and looked at the number for a long time. The difference between the two readings was 15 kilometers and 200 meters. Not 14. Not 14 kilometers exactly as every document I had been given described this stretch. 15 and 200 meters. 1 mile extra. I thought I had misread the eastern reading. I drove back east. I noted the reading at the cattle grid. I drove west again. I noted the reading at the western marker. I sat in the vehicle and looked at the number. 1 mile extra. I drove it 4 more times that night. East to west. West to east. East to west. West to east. The extra mile appeared every time I drove east to west. It did not appear driving west to east. I wrote 14 kilometers in the log. I drove home. I did not sleep. Fell wind rises briefly, then settles back to its baseline presence. I did not tell anyone. Not because I thought they would disbelieve me, because the moment I said it out loud, it became something I would have to explain. And I could not explain it. I still cannot explain it. What I can do is describe it. That is what I have always been able to do. I am not a complicated person. I am not given to imagination or to the kind of thinking that reaches for explanations beyond what the evidence supports. 18 years of road maintenance will do that to a person. The job rewards precision and punishes assumption. You document what you find. You report what you can verify. You do not speculate. I have speculated exactly once in 18 years. Year 3. When I worked out the conditions, the mile does not appear every night. I used to think it was random. Year 1, I thought that. Year 2, I started noticing patterns but could not confirm them. Year 3, I confirmed them. It appears on nights when 3 things are true simultaneously. Temperature below 4 degrees Celsius. Not -4. 4. The specific threshold above freezing, where something in the fell air changes quality in a way I cannot measure, but have learned to read in the 20 minutes before I turn onto the eastern approach. I feel it before I reach the road. In the depot car park. In the way the cold sits differently against my face when I open the vehicle door. Not colder than other cold nights. Different. A quality to it that I have no word for and have stopped trying to find a word for. I just know it when I feel it. Cloud cover at or above 90%. Not overcast in the general sense. A specific density of cover, the kind that eliminates ambient light completely, that makes the road ahead of the headlights the only visible thing in any direction. Not just dark. Closed. The sky feeling lower than usual on those nights. Closer. As if whatever covers it has descended to a specific altitude and will not descend further and will not lift until the mile has done what the mile does. And wind from the north. Not strong wind. The fell gets strong northerlies regularly, and the mile does not always appear in strong northerlies. A specific quality of northern wind low, present, the kind that moves across the fell surface without lifting. The kind I have driven into for 18 years and have learned to distinguish from every other direction by the way it sounds against the vehicle. A particular note to it, almost below the range of hearing. You feel it more than hear it. On the nights, all three conditions are present, I know, before I reach the eastern approach. I know in the car park. I know on the approach road. I know at the cattle grid when I note the first odometer reading, and my hand is already steady in the way it gets steady when I am preparing for something that requires steadiness. When all three conditions are present, the mile appears. I have been wrong about this prediction twice in 12 years. Once in year 4 when I expected the mile, and the conditions shifted at the last moment and the road ran its correct length. I sat at the western marker for 20 minutes that night, checking the odometer reading 3 times. Correct, 14 kilometers. I drove home feeling something I could not name. Not relief. Something more complicated than relief. The specific feeling of a person who has prepared for something and found it was not there and is not certain whether to be glad. Once in year 7, when I did not expect the mile and found it anyway. That was the night I understood the conditions were mine to observe but not mine to control. The mile appeared when it chose to appear. The conditions were not the cause. They were the signal. I have not been wrong since year 7. Sound. Radio, static, brief. Then not static. The specific silence of an occupied frequency. Present for 3 seconds, then gone. I want to tell you what it feels like to drive into it, not what it looks like. It does not look like anything. The road ahead is the road. The verges are the verges. The sky above is the sky. Nothing changes in any way that a camera would capture or that a passenger would notice. What changes is the quality. The air through the vents becomes different. Not colder, not warmer. Different in a way. I have spent 18 years trying to find the right word for and have not found it. The closest I can get is older. The air through the vents in the extra mile smells of something that has been here for a very long time. Not decay, not earth. Something that predates both of those things. The headlights behave differently on the road surface. Not visibly. Not in a way you would notice without paying the kind of attention I pay. The light return is fractionally slower, as if the surface of the road in the extra mile is absorbing a small percentage of the light, rather than reflecting all of it. I noticed this in year 2. I have checked it every time since. It is always true in the extra mile, never true outside it. And the radio. Radio silence, the specific silence of an occupied frequency. Not static, not interference, occupied. Not static, not a lost signal. Silence of a specific kind, the kind that is not empty. I turned the radio off in year 3 and have never turned it on again. During a shift. Some silences are better left unexamined. And the feeling. I have told you I am not given to imagination. I am telling you this. Again, because what I am about to describe will sound like imagination. And I need you to understand that it is not. From the moment I enter the extra mile to the moment I exit it, I am aware of being observed. Not watched, observed. The distinction matters. Watched implies something looking at you from the outside. Observed implies something that has noted your presence and is attending to it with the full and patient weight of its attention. Something that has been here long enough to have developed the specific quality of attention that does not need to announce itself. I feel it every time I drive the extra mile. I have felt it 473 times. I have never stopped. Until year 6. Engine hum drops. Vehicle slowing. Then stopping. Silence. Beneath the narration for the first time. I do not know why I stopped. I have examined this question for 12 years. I have gone back to it in the way I go back to a drain that keeps blocking methodically, without assumption, looking for the cause rather than assuming I know what it is. I cannot find the decision in my memory. I cannot locate the moment I chose to stop because I do not believe I chose it. The vehicle was moving, and then the vehicle was not moving. And I was sitting at what I now know was the exact midpoint of the extra mile with the engine running and my hands in my lap and no memory of the decision to stop. 11 seconds. I know the exact duration because I counted. The habit of counting. 18 years of it. Odometer readings, drain clearance times, barrier repair durations, temperature readings at the start and end of each shift. I count things. It is what the job made me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then I started the vehicle. In those 11 seconds, I looked at the eastern verge. I did not decide to look at the eastern verge. My head simply turned. The way your head turns toward a sound you have not consciously registered. The involuntary response of a body receiving information before the mind has caught up with what the body knows. Complete silence. Fell wind gone. Engine hum gone. Everything gone. Just his voice. It was standing at the edge of the verge. Not on the road. Not in the road. At the boundary. The exact line where the maintained road surface met the unmanaged fell beyond it. Standing at exactly that boundary, as if it understood the distinction between maintained and unmanaged, and had chosen to position itself precisely at the point where one became the other. As if it knew where the road's authority ended. As if it had been standing at that exact boundary for a very long time. Large. That is the first thing. Large in the way of something that has been here long enough to grow into its dimensions without any awareness of them. Not large in the way that announces itself. Not large in the way that is designed to intimidate. Simply large. The way a very old tree is large. Because it has been here long enough for that to happen. Because time produces size in things that do not stop. Still. The second thing. Completely still, in the way that only practiced stillness could produce. Not frozen, not holding its breath. Still in the way of something that has learned to hold stillness, because stillness is what the situation required. And it had been in this situation enough times to know exactly what was required. The stillness of patience that has been refined across more time than I can account for. It was looking at the vehicle. Not at me. At the vehicle. This is the detail that has stayed with me for 12 years. Not the size, not the stillness. The fact that it was looking at the vehicle rather than at me. as if the vehicle was what it had been waiting for, as if the stopped vehicle was the condition it had been patient for. Not a person, a stopped vehicle. At the midpoint, on the right kind of night, with the specific quality of attention I described earlier, the observing rather than the watching, the noting of a presence, the registering of something it had been expecting. And then I started the vehicle. Engine starts. Immediate, clean. I do not know why it let me start it. I have thought about this for 12 years as well. I do not know why it let me drive out. The only answer I have arrived at is this: 11 seconds was not enough. Whatever the condition is, whatever the mile requires before it releases a stopped vehicle, 11 seconds was not enough. And I drove out before the condition was met. I drove the remaining 7 kilometers to the depot without stopping. I sat in the car park for 40 minutes. I went inside. I wrote 14 kilometers in the log. I drove home. I made one rule: do not stop. Fell wind returns. Low. Steady. The baseline presence restored. The rule is simple. Maintain speed. Exactly 40 kilometers per hour through the extra mile. Not faster. I tested faster in year 7. The mile extended. As if it was matching my urgency. As if it understood that speed was an attempt to reduce the time spent inside it and had decided to respond by increasing that time proportionally. I drove at 60 in year 7 and the mile ran to 1.5. I drove at 80 and it ran to 2. I drove back to 40 and it returned to 1. I have driven at exactly 40 ever since. Not slower. Exactly 40. Do not look at the verges. This is the most important part of the rule. I cannot tell you what happens if you look at the verges while moving through the extra mile because I have never looked at the verges while moving. I know what I saw in 11 seconds of being stopped in year 6. I am not willing to find out what I would see in the 47 seconds it takes to drive the extra mile at exactly 40 kilometers per hour with my eyes on the eastern verge. Do not check the mirrors. Same reason. What is behind you in the extra mile is behind you. Looking at it does not change what it is. It only changes whether you know it is there. And knowing in the extra mile is not always the advantage you would assume. Do not turn the radio on. The silence on the occupied frequency is worse heard through speakers than heard through its absence. I know this because I turned the radio on once in year 8. Once. I turned it off within 4 seconds. Keep both hands on the wheel and both eyes forward and drive through it the way you drive through any other mile of any other road on any other night. It has worked for 12 years. 416 drives through the extra mile since year 6 without incident, without stopping, without looking at the verges, without checking the mirrors. The rule worked. Until last Wednesday, engine hum present, steady, tires on tarmac. Then, engine dies, sudden, clean. No warning, no splutter, simply gone. The exact midpoint of the extra mile. I know it was the exact midpoint because I have driven this stretch 473 times. And I know its distances the way I know my own breathing. Exact midpoint. I was at exactly 40 kilometers per hour. I had my eyes forward. I had both hands on the wheel. I was following the rule, and the engine stopped anyway. Not spluttering, not warning me, not the gradual decline of a mechanical failure building across previous shifts that I had failed to notice. Simply off. As if something had reached into the mechanism from outside and closed it. I tried the ignition. Ignition click. No response. Nothing. Again. Ignition click. No response. Again. Ignition click. No response. 6 times. I tried it 6 times. I counted. 6 clean ignition clicks. 6 times the starter engaged and produced nothing. 6 times the engine confirmed that it was not going to start. Then I stopped trying. Not because I gave up, because 6 times was enough information. 6 times told me everything the ignition had to tell me. The engine was not going to start, not through mechanical failure that further attempts would address, not through a flooded cylinder or a drained battery. Simply not going to start. I am a road maintenance worker. I understand vehicles. I understand what a failed start sounds like when the cause is mechanical, and I understand what a failed start sounds like when the cause is something else. This was something else. Door locks engaging, one after another. 4 individual locks in sequence, deliberate, even, one after another, not centrally, individually, each one engaging in sequence with the specific sound of a mechanism operating correctly, not malfunctioning, functioning, doing exactly what it was doing, deliberately and in order. Driver door first, then passenger, then rear left, then rear right. 4 locks, 4 seconds between each one. The spacing of something that was not rushing, that wanted me to hear each one separately. That understood the difference between locking all 4 simultaneously and locking them one at a time. I looked at the door handle. I did not touch it. I already knew. I knew from the sound of the locks that touching the handle would confirm what I already knew, and I was not ready for that confirmation yet. So I did not touch it. I looked at it. Lights failing, one by one. A subtle electrical sound with each. Dashboard first, then instruments, then headlights, then everything. Dashboard first. The instruments I use to do my job. Speed, temperature, fuel level. All of them going dark simultaneously. The specific black of a screen that has lost power rather than the specific black of a screen that has been switched off. There is a difference. I know the difference. Then, the instrument panel. Then the headlights. The road in front of me visible for 1 more second. The fell either side visible for 1 more second. The specific quality of the extra mile visible for 1 more second. In the full beam of the headlights. The road surface with its fractionally slower light return. The verges with whatever stood at their boundaries. The dark sky closed above. 1 second. Then gone. Complete silence and darkness. Absolute. The specific silence of a vehicle with no power in a place with no ambient sound whatsoever. Complete dark. Not the dark of a road at night with stars or ambient light from distant settlements. The dark of a place that does not permit light. The dark of somewhere that has been dark for a very long time and has no interest in changing that. I kept my eyes forward. I had the rule. I followed the rule even now, even here, even stopped in the complete dark at the midpoint of a mile that does not exist on any document in the highway authority's records. I kept my eyes forward. I kept both hands on the wheel. I breathed. 43 seconds of complete silence and complete dark. I counted. 3 taps on the driver window. Slow, even. 2 full seconds between each tap. Not a knuckle. Something approximating a knock without being one. 3 taps. Slow. The first tap, 2 seconds. The second tap, 2 seconds. The third, not urgent, not hesitant. The knock of something that has done this before, that knows exactly how long to wait between each tap, that has learned the approximate gesture across enough time to have refined it into something almost correct. Almost. Not quite a knuckle, not quite a fist. Something that had learned the approximate gesture of a knock without having the exact instrument for producing one. I did not turn my head. I want you to understand that. I did not turn my head. I kept my eyes forward. I kept both hands on the wheel. I followed the rule even now because the rule was the only thing I had, and I was not going to abandon it at the exact moment I needed it most. But I could see the window in my peripheral vision. Breathing on glass, almost inaudible. The specific sound of breath condensing on cold glass from the outside. Present, steady, deliberate. The glass was fogging. From the outside. Something was breathing on the driver's window from the outside. At the midpoint of a mile that does not exist. At 17 inches the morning. On a road I have driven alone for 18 years. Breathing on it. Steadily. Not urgently. The breath of something that had time. That was not going anywhere. That understood that whatever it was waiting for would eventually happen and was content to wait for it. I have 1 bar of signal. I am telling you this because I need someone to know. I do not know if the signal will hold. I do not know how long I have. Phone signal crackle. 1 bar. Faint. Present beneath his voice. From this point forward, I have been sitting at the midpoint of the extra mile, for I have lost track of exactly how long. My phone says 2:34 a.m. I have been here for 1 hour and 17 minutes. The breathing on the glass stopped approximately 40 minutes ago. I do not know if that is better. The fogging cleared. Slowly. The way fogging clears when the source of breath is removed gradually from the edges inward, the glass returning to its normal cold clarity. The glass is clear now. The dark outside the window is the same dark it has been since the lights failed. I cannot see anything. I have not looked at the verge. I have not checked the mirror. I am following the rule. The rule that exists because of 11 seconds in year 6. The rule that I made or that was given to me. I have never been certain which, because something in the extra mile understood that a person who had seen what I saw in the verge would need a framework for continuing to drive this road. And I continued to drive it. 416 times after year 6, I drove the extra mile without stopping. I think about that now. 416 times. I followed the rule. I think about whether those 416 drives were leading here. Whether the road was patient enough to wait. Whether patience is the quality that something develops when it has been occupying the same mile for longer than roads have existed. I think it is. I think patience is exactly what it develops. And I think tonight the patience was satisfied. Not exhausted. Not defeated. Completed. The way a process completes when the conditions it has been waiting for are finally met. I think about the 11 seconds. I think about why it let me drive out after 11 seconds. I think the answer is that 11 seconds was not enough. I think there is a duration, a specific duration, a threshold. The same way the conditions for the mile appearing are a threshold. The same way the temperature and the cloud cover and the wind are specific and measurable. The duration, a stopped vehicle, must remain stopped at the midpoint. I stopped for 11 seconds in year 6. I do not know what the required duration is. I know I have been here for 1 hour and 17 minutes. I think about the 2 colleagues who covered my shifts. They drove this road in daylight and handed the logs back without saying anything unusual had happened. I used to think that was because nothing unusual happened in daylight. I think differently now. I think they did not count the distance. I think the mile was there. I think they drove through it without knowing they drove through it. I think the extra mile has always been there. I think the extra mile has always been patient. I think the extra mile has always been waiting for someone who counted. Someone who knew the exact number of times they had driven it. Someone who had spent 18 years maintaining the road that ran through it and had never told anyone and had never stopped and had followed the rule for 12 years without ever writing it down. Someone for whom the stopped vehicle was not an accident, was not a mechanical failure, was the only way the mile could produce the condition it required. I think tonight was always going to be tonight. I think the engine did not fail. I think the engine was stopped. From outside the vehicle, by something that had been waiting a very long time for the person who counted to stop counting and simply be stopped. Phone signal crackle intensifies briefly, then stabilizes. I have been a road maintenance worker for 18 years. I know how to assess a situation. I know how to separate what I can verify from what I cannot. Here is what I can verify. The engine will not start. The doors will not open. The signal is holding at 1 bar. The dark outside the vehicle is complete and has been so for 1 hour and 31 minutes. Nothing has tapped on the window since 1:17 a.m. Nothing has breathed on the glass since approximately 1:54 a.m. Here is what I cannot verify. Whether the silence means the mile is empty, or whether the silence means something in the mile has decided that tapping and breathing were not the right approach, and has decided to wait instead. Something patient enough to have been here before the road existed has no difficulty waiting another hour. Another night, however long it takes. Phone signal crackle. 1 bar. Steady. I am keeping my eyes forward. I am keeping both hands on the wheel. I am following the rule that says do not stop. I have stopped. The rule that says keep moving. I cannot move. The rule that has kept me safe for 12 years has nothing left to tell me about what comes after this. I have the window that fogged from the outside on my left side. I have 1 bar of signal. I have 18 years of knowing this road better than I know anything else. And I have the specific clarity of a person who has run out of options and found, on the other side of that, something that is almost like peace. Not because everything is going to be fine, because I have been here before. Not in this vehicle, not at this midpoint, not with these doors locked and these lights out and this specific dark outside, but in the moment of understanding that there are things on this fell that have been here longer than the fell has had a name. Things that are patient, things that select, things that wait for someone who counts. I counted. 473 times I drove the extra mile. I am the 474th. The signal is holding. I do not know for how much longer. I want whoever finds this to know the conditions. Temperature below 4 degrees. Cloud cover above 90%. Wind from the north. Low. Present. When all three are true simultaneously, the mile appears between the cattle grid at the eastern approach and the stone wall marker at the western end. Do not stop in the extra mile. I cannot tell you what happens if you stop. Phone signal, crackle. Intensifies. Fades. 1 bar barely holding. I can tell you what happens when something stops you. Complete silence. Signal gone. Everything gone. His voice only. Drive through it. Whatever you do. Whatever it does. Drive through it. If you made it this far, you already know what Scar Howl is. Hit subscribe. The forest remembers everyone who listens. It will remember you.